This is the Almost Timely newsletter for the week of April 21st, 2024. Content authenticity statement: 100% of this week's newsletter was generated by me, the human, although we will be doing some demo stuff in Google Gemini, but it's the AI content is not in the newsletter. There's a link at the top of the newsletter to learn why this kind of disclosure is a good idea and might be required for anyone doing business in any capacity with the EU in the near future. What's on my mind this week? Does prompt engineering still matter? By the way, I do recommend, if you are listening or reading, to have the YouTube version that's handy and watch it when we get to the demo section, because it will be illuminating, hopefully, for you. This week, let's answer an important question about generative AI. Is prompt engineering still necessary? It depends on the use case, but the answer is mostly yes. It's still necessary and still important for us to learn and perfect. Why? Because as we become more advanced in our use of AI, we're going to run into more use cases where a well-crafted prompt makes a big difference in performance. Let's start with a very, very brief refresher. Prompt engineering is how we program large language models to do things. Tools like ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, Google Gemini, Meta's Llama. You've probably even noticed in your Instagram app, there's now a llama-based AI little bar waiting to help you. Like, it's literally everywhere. Prompt engineering is a programming language. Prompting is a programming language. The difference is it's in a language of your choice and not a computer language like Python or Java. When we write prompts, we are coding, and you code all the time because coding is just giving repeatable, reliable steps, instructions to achieve an outcome. A recipe is code, right? Instructions are code. They open a game box for a tabletop game. There's instructions in it. That's code. Open something from IKEA. There's a whole bunch of instructions there. That is code. Maybe a little hard to understand sometimes, but it's still code. Training your dog, giving instructions, sit, stand, whatever. That's code. As with all code, there are ways to code inefficiently and ways to code efficiently. Inefficient code involves constantly reinventing the wheel, not putting any kind of error checking, repeating yourself over and over again instead of consolidating things together, not documenting things. I kind of do all these things. Efficient coding is basically the opposite of that. So let's dig into whether prompt engineering is necessary or not, whether we need to formalize it into some best practices. As a tangent, best practices are basically recipes. They're a starting point for your journey, and they're essential, especially for beginners. I talked about this earlier this week, but beware anyone who says there are no best practices. There's no such thing as best practices. They're either trying to sell you something or they're not very good at what they do. All right. The first major use case in generative AI is the consumer use case, which is probably like 90% of uses these days. You, the human, sit down at your keyboard or your mobile device, you open up the interface of your choice, like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever, and you start having a conversation with the AI model. You give it some instructions, you converse with it, you ask clarifying questions, and you get the result you want. Do you need a formal prompt engineering practice for this use case? Is it important? For this particular use case, prompt engineering does deliver benefits like repeatability, but it's not absolutely essential. You can get done what you need to get done without the formal discipline of prompt engineering. You might find it inefficient after a while. The second use case is sharing your prompts with teammates or colleagues. Maybe you work on a team and your team has similar processes and practices. You definitely want to share your prompts so that other team members can help improve them, and so that you can cut down on the time it takes to get any particular task or any particular team member up and running. This is a case where the discipline of prompt engineering does matter. Taking the time to craft great prompts so that you can share them makes a lot of sense and will rapidly increase the speed of adoption of generative AI in your company. The third use case is using small models. There are big consumer models like the ones that power ChatGPT, GPT-4 Turbo, where you can have a conversation and get what you need eventually. But there are smaller models like Meta's newly released Llama 3 that have shorter memories and very specific prompt templates that they are expecting you to write in to maximize their capabilities. People who build software with generative AI baked in will often use models like this, like Llama 3, because of the very low cost. Meta basically gives it away for free, and it costs server room space to run it, or device capacity to run it, but it's essentially a free. But that means more specific, actual best practices for prompting in that format that they specify. The prompting that you use for a big model like the one in ChatGPT is going to give you subpar results on a small model like Llama 3. If you work in a highly regulated industry, there's a very good chance you're going to be using one of these smaller models, because these models can be run on hardware that your company owns. For example, if you work in healthcare, a model like Llama 3 is very capable, but can run solely on your company's computers, ensuring that protected health information never, ever leaves your network, right? It is ideal for that use case. If you work in the defense industry, you don't want any kind of national security secrets going into a third-party service. You want to have it going to a model that is on your company's computers. When you use a model like that in that circumstance, prompt engineering is important to squeeze every bit of performance out of that particular kind of model. Finally, the fourth use case is scaling your prompts with code and agents. Say you write a prompt that does a great job of summarizing an article or doing sentiment analysis or whatever, and you write it out, you got it written down. Do you really want to copy and paste that 1,000 times to analyze a big compendium of articles? Of course not. You want to automate that. You want to write some code around that and have it repeat it 1,000 times to a model and get the results back. But you're going to want to make sure your prompt is bulletproof, because once it goes into a piece of code, it goes into an agent, it goes into a system of some kind, you're going to have fewer chances to revise it, to make it efficient for its very specific outcomes. And you want to do the whole software development lifecycle to make sure that the prompt functions as intended all the time. What this means in the big picture is that the discipline of prompt engineering isn't going anywhere. We are still in the earliest days of generative AI, and what we do today is not what we're going to do tomorrow. But prompt engineering, based on the four use cases I outlined above, unlikely to go away anytime soon. Okay, so that's great. But how? How do you take on the discipline of prompt engineering? How do you improve your prompt engineering? How do you become better at prompting models? This is where the Trust Insights framework, the PARE framework, comes into play, which I debuted a couple of weeks ago. You can find it if you go to trustinsights.ai/power questions. You can see it. You'll be able to download a copy, and I'll just bring that up here. This is totally free, no form to fill out. But let's take some time to step through this so that you can see what it does. And again, I recommend, if you're listening, watch the video version of this part. So we are 7 or 8 minutes into this. This is the time to go to YouTube. The PARE framework is a series of 4 power questions: prime, augment, refresh, and evaluate. Prime means to get a model started by asking it what it knows about a topic. We don't want to presume that a model knows everything about a topic, especially as we start using it for more specialized cases. So as part of our initial prompt, we ask it what it knows about a topic. We evaluate its results. If it doesn't have the knowledge we want, or the knowledge is incorrect, we want to provide it. We know we have to provide it as part of the prompt. Augment means to ask a model what questions it has. This helps close gaps in our knowledge and prevents omissions on our part. After we complete our initial prompt, we ask this question category. Hey, what questions do you have? Refresh means to ask a model what we forgot, what we overlooked. This happens after the first response to the model, further seal gaps in our knowledge. And evaluate means to ask a model if it fulfilled our prompt completely. This is an important question when a model's output doesn't meet our expectations, and our expectations were clear up front in the prompt engineering process. So let's put this into action. I'm going to go over here to Google's AI Studio, but you can use the model of your choice, or the interface of your choice. You use ChatGPT, you can use Claude, whatever, doesn't matter. Today, let's step through the PARE framework, evaluating terms of service. This is something I was talking about on LinkedIn the other day, about how companies have very broad terms of service that could be interpreted as allowing them to do whatever they want with your content, including training AI models on it. So Our first part, we're going to want to do some role and action stuff here. So I'm going to start by saying, all right, so I've written a prompt here that says you will role play a legal expert who specializes in terms of service, terms and conditions, commercial law, contracts, and user license agreements. Your first task is to explain what you know about best practices for writing terms of service for software companies that allow submission of user-generated content. This is such as social networks, photo sharing sites, fan fiction sites, and similar types of companies and software. What do you know about this topic? So what it has spit out is pretty clear. The best practices for terms of service for user-generated content platforms, content ownership and licensing, what kinds of licenses are being granted, content moderation removal, user conduct and restrictions, additional considerations such as intellectual property, and so on and so forth. This is the P in PARE. We have primed the model. We have gotten its knowledge about a topic. Now, one thing that I think is missing here is we want to evaluate terms of service for the use of generative AI. So I want to augment this. If we go back to our PARE framework, let's say what questions do you have is going to be our augment. So I'm going to add some clarification here and then ask it some additional questions. I specifically asked, I would like to know specifically focus on the license that the user grants to the service provider to use their content. What do you know about these licenses? And what it says here, of course, is types of licenses, exclusive or not exclusive, scope of license grant, reproduction, distribution, modification, public display, sub-licensing, duration, territory, et cetera, et cetera. So we've gotten some more useful stuff here. This is very, very helpful. I want to focus in on modification and derivative works. So I've asked it, tell me more about the license given to the service provider for making derivative works. What does this enable the service provider to do? So it goes through and says, what are derivative works? Modifications, adaptations, translations, compilations, implications of granting derivative works rights, flexibility for the service provider, potential for user concerns. Users might have concerns about how their content is modified, particularly if changes alter the original meaning or message, scope of modifications, and so on and so forth. Examples of derivative works in user content platforms, social media, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we've now done a lot of priming to get all this knowledge loaded into the model's memory. And you can see down here at the bottom, there's the preview of how many tokens we've used, or roughly how many words we've put into this so far. We've got a couple thousand in here. So now what we want to do is specify what it is that we want the model to do. So we're going to give it the specifications, then ask it if it has any questions. So I've asked, great. What I'd like to do is evaluate the terms of service for a given company and understand how it's scoped. From that, I would like you to make a determination about whether the terms of service permits the service provider to use the user's submitted generated content to train the service provider's generative AI models. What questions do you have about this task? So we've gone from priming to augmenting. What questions do you have about this task? And it comes back and says, to determine whether a company's specific terms of service allows them to use user-generated content for training the generative models, I would need some additional information. Can you provide the document? Obviously. Are there specific sections related to user content licensing and property rights? Does the terms of service mention AI or machine learning? Has it been updated recently? What types of service does the company provide? What kind of generative models does the company develop? Considerations for evaluation, scope of license grant, purpose of use, data privacy and security, transparency, and user consent. So it's asked all very good questions. Now, a lot of these questions are going to be answered by the terms of service itself, but I might want to give it a bit of information. So let's go ahead and we're going to go and grab Meta's terms of service. So now what I've done is I've said, this is the terms of service of Meta, the company that provides Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Threads, and a variety of other services. And I've loaded the entire terms of service document, which is about 6,000 tokens, which is about 5,000 words, give or take. And the model starting its evaluation says, thank you for providing Meta's terms of service. I reviewed the document. Here's my analysis of user-generated content for training generative AI models. Relevant sections, section 3.1, permission to use content you create and share. Section 1, the services we provide. Analysis. The terms of service grants Meta a broad, non-exclusive license to use, distribute, modify, and create derivative works of user content. This language could potentially encompass using the content for AI training purposes, as it involves creating derivative works, the AI model, based on the original content. While the terms of service outlines various purposes for using user data, it does not explicitly mention user content for AI training. It also doesn't say it doesn't do that. The terms of service emphasizes user control over content sharing, but does not explicitly inform users about the potential of using their content for AI training. Ambiguity and potential concerns. The broad language in the license grant section leaves room for interpretation and could be argued to include AI training as a permissible use of user content. So this is a really good analysis, right? We've gotten this series of interactions to analyze a set of terms of service. So we've done the augment. What questions do you have? Next, we got to refresh. So what I've said is, great. In the context of terms of service being used to grant service providers the license to use UGC for training AI models, what did I overlook? What did I forget to ask you about this topic that would shed more light on how companies might be leveraging user-generated content to train generative AI models? Now, it's important to know we're doing this fairly far on in the process here, right? It says expanding the scope. You've done a great job. Does the terms of service address how user data is anonymized, et cetera, et cetera? Why are we doing this now? If you look down here at the token count, we're now at almost 10,000 tokens, about 7,500 words. We've gotten all of Meta stuff in here. We've gotten a bunch of inquiries. We asked this question now because remember that generative models are kind of like choose your own adventure stories, right? We're pretty far into the story now. So now when we ask this clarifying question, we've got a lot of conversation history for it to draw on and say, okay, well, maybe there's some things that have come up in the terms of service itself or in our conversation that would further either narrow the focus of the conversation or branch out into things that we forgot about. You wouldn't ask this in the beginning of the conversation because we don't have enough of the story yet. We don't have enough of the knowledge yet. Now, 7,000 words in, we have quite a lot of knowledge here. We have quite a lot of information in this session. So at this point, I don't feel like there's a need to have the model check its work. If it had spit out something nonsensical, I would say, hey, check your work. But as part of evaluation, let's now turn this into a prompt. Okay, so what I've done is I've written the summarization. I said, great, what I'd like you to do next is rewrite all of our findings into a prompt for a large language model such as Google Gemini or ChatGPT. The prompt's goal is to help us evaluate a provided terms of service for how permissive it is, for how easily it would allow a service provider to use a user's content to train generative AI models. Write the prompt as directions for the language model to follow in the second person, aka you are a whatever. Include relevant context and key criteria as discussed. Create a scoring rubric in the prompt that returns a score of 0 to 10, where 10 is completely allows the service provider to use UGC for AI model training without restriction, and 0 is completely forbids the use of UGC for any AI model training. Now let's see what it came up with. We've got objective, instructions, scoring rubric. Ooh, this is nice. Output based on your things, additional notes. So this is a really, really nice prompt. So what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and copy this into a text document. Maybe give it a little bit of breathing room here so we can read it. This is our prompt. This is our fully baked prompt. We used Gemini to write the prompt. So this prompt is ideal for use with Gemini. You would probably want to use a similar process with ChatGPT because ChatGPT is going to do things differently. Right? It's got its own model. Anthropic's Claude will do things differently. So this part, the summarization part, should be done for use with that model. So I would not necessarily take this straight out of here and put it into ChatGPT, for example, because this is really based on Gemini's knowledge and Gemini's way it thinks prompts should work. Now, let's put this to the test. Right, so I'm going to go and let's go over to YouTube's terms of service. So YouTube has quite the long terms of service here. I've copied this into a text document. Now, we're going to test this prompt that we generated out. I'm going to start a brand new session. Let's save this. Brand new session. I will start with the Gemini prompt, right? This is the big thing that we just generated. And I'm going to attach our YouTube terms of service. Now you'll note we're not doing prompt, augment, refresh, evaluate. Now we did that to build the prompt. And so now this prompt should function pretty much one shot. And here it comes. It says, based on the provided terms of service, I would a score of 7 to 9, mostly permissive regarding YouTube's ability to use user-generated content for training generative AI models. Here's a breakdown of the key points: broad license grant, monetization rights, data retention, areas of ambiguity, potential implications, recommendations, increase transparency. But YouTube got a score between 7 and 9, right? They mostly permissive, aka YouTube can use your content for training its AI models. Here's the important part. Remember, we were talking at the beginning about the 4 different use cases. We did the first use case, just having a conversation. That's how we built the prompt. But then we talked about sharing this prompt. Maybe if I worked at a law firm, I would want to take the prompt itself, right, and share this with my colleagues and say, hey, let's use this to evaluate terms of service. Right? Maybe another use case would be highly regulated, right? If I was evaluating something, confidential terms of service, I would again use this prompt. But here's the key: this prompt returns a really nice output. I could put this in a piece of code. Like a Python script or an AI agent, and have it go and evaluate all the terms of service of all the different social networks, Pinterest and Instagram and Snapchat, and you name it, programmatically. By going through this process, the PARE framework, to build that ideal prompt, I now have this piece of code fully baked, that I can reuse over and over and over again, either individually with coworkers or in programming script that will allow me to scale the knowledge that we have built into this prompt and be super productive with it. Right? So this is how we do this. This is how you build a really powerful prompt. This is how you do prompt engineering. When you do this, and it took some time, right? It took about 10 minutes to do this. When you do this, you end up with great prompts. And this is not a small prompt, right? This is not a 2-sentence, hey, evaluate whether YouTube allows us to use our content for generative AI. No, this is extensive. This is detailed. This is what your prompts should look like. And now you've seen the process for building that so that you get this level of comprehensiveness. So follow these steps, follow this framework to generate highly effective, highly scalable prompts and build a robust prompt engineering practice. You will help your team grow their capabilities quickly. You will help your company scale its use of generative AI. You will generate a lot of value from prompt engineering and generative AI faster than ever before, faster than you have been, faster than your competitors, etc. Shameless plug. This is literally what my company does. So if you want help doing this, you want help with a workshop on this with your team, we do that. There's a link in the newsletter to hit me up about it. All right. What else happened this week? Of course, reminding people, the Generative AI for Marketers course just got an update last week. Chapters 1, 2, 3, and 20 were all re-recorded because things just change really fast. So go check that out. I also did a piece this week on hallmarks of AI-generated content, how you can tell that a piece of content was generated by AI. So go check that out. And a bunch of other stuff, of course, all on generative AI this week. That's pretty much the topic of discussion all the time. What else we got going on? Getting people back to work. Let's look at the jobs list. We have Digital Marketing Manager at NRP Group, Director of Content Strategy at Bixel, Director of Public Relations at Heinz, Director of Internal Communications at Aspen Dental, Executive Director at Run for Something, Freelance Data Journalist at Him and Hers, Head of Sales at Cloverleaf, Integrated Marketing Manager at QVest, I guess is the name, marketing manager for American Girl at Mattel, multimedia content producer, editor at Salesforce, philanthropic advisor at Harvard University, senior manager of sales and marketing at GitHub, senior data platform engineer at the Gates Foundation, VP of sustainability at J.Crew, VP of social media at Gregory FCA, VP of community experience at Chief, and VP of corporate technology at Edelman Holdings. So lots of hiring going on. Go check out these positions. They sound good. In other news this week, we had things like Instagram tactics for retail from our friends over at Agora Pulse, tracking ROI from content marketing, Google answers if changing web hosting affects SEO. You have to go read the article to find out the answer for that. Llama 3's benchmarks are in. Andre Karpathy had a really good piece on this as well. The Llama 3 model, for being an open model that you can run on your laptop, is really good, and it's still not as good as it could be. Andre was talking about how Meta basically had to stop the training at a certain point just to get the thing out the door, but there's still more room for improvement. So they may be actually working on Llama 4 because it takes months to train these models. And that's also why Meta spent like $26 billion on hardware this year, which is pretty amazing stuff. From IBM, our friends over there, getting ready for artificial general intelligence, probable root cause analysis. I'm going to do a piece this week on using the Llama 3 model within IBM Watson X, because it is probably the easiest way to get started with that model. And of course, being able to use it within a cloud system that is secure, which is what IBM is really best at, is reassuring for a lot of people. Finally, this week, some fun stuff. Religious worship attendance from the National Bureau of Economic Research. Interestingly, they showed that despite what people answer on surveys, actual attendance based on cell phone data is really, really low. Cybertruck deliveries have been halted and the vehicle has been recalled because of problems. And Boston Dynamics released their Atlas, their brand new Atlas robot. And boy, is it something. I don't know about you, but that had to be the creepiest possible way you could have debuted that robot. So it is an impressive looking robot, but yeah, that was quite the reveal. Upcoming events this week, I will be at the Society for Marketing Professional Services here in Boston. Then in a couple weeks, I'll be in Melbourne, Australia, for the Australian Food and Grocery Council, the Food and Grocery Australia Conference, followed by the Society for Marketing Professional Services 2-day workshop in Los Angeles, then the Marketing AI Conference in Cleveland, and the Marketing Process B2B Forum. So lots of events coming up, more on the way. Still waiting on paperwork for a few more, but that's what's coming for events. So if you're going to be at any of those events, please do say hi. That's going to do it for this week's newsletter. I hope that you found the PARE framework useful, and seeing the walkthrough of how we can build really robust prompts was helpful to you. I'll catch you on the next one. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you want to know when new videos are available, hit the bell button to be notified as soon as new content is live.